Hello, friends. This is Dr. T, Tanya Armstrong, and I am so glad that you are back today. I wanted to share with you a message today to guide us further along in blossoming hope. For those of you who perhaps have seen some of the other videos, you know that we've been touching on some of the highlights of the book Blossoming Hope, the Black Christian Woman's Guide to Mental Health and Wellness. And on this video, I was going to, in my mind at least, talk about the chapter where we begin to focus on promoting positive thoughts. And the first part of that chapter, which is chapter 4, is looking at our purpose and our destiny. And I am still going to talk about purpose and destiny today, but sort of going through the back door. I don't know about you all, but I have had a challenging week. And just in my reflection about the week, it has given me pause, giving me a slightly different direction for what I wanted to share about today. And so, one of the purposes for shifting a bit is to acknowledge that in life we are going to have those times where it feels like we're having a bad day or a bad week or even longer. And it reminds me of a conversation that I had with my grandmother many years ago. She is of blessed memory now. She passed away about 10 years ago. But I remember we were having a conversation, and she was 87 at the time. And I don't remember specifically what we were talking about, but I shared with her a burden in my heart, and she said, "Child, if it ain't one thing, it's another." Now, I'm sure that she had said that many times before, and I'll bet that you've heard that many times before. But there was something about that conversation that day where it dawned on me at the time that she was 87 years old, and that if she was still having that experience day to day of encountering challenges, then I should probably expect no less. And so today I want to talk about perseverance, or perhaps endurance is another term that we can reflect on together. So I want to talk about this notion of how we are on this Christian journey, and we are running it, if we're wise, more like a marathon than a sprint. Because as we continue to live life, we are going to encounter disappointments, discouragements, even tragedies. And yet, what is most important is not what happens to us, but how we respond to what happens to us. And so I'd like to talk about some strategies that we can take in order to press on, to endure. So I'd like for you to consider that one of the things that we can do to help ourselves persevere is to manage our expectations differently. Now, we all have expectations, and many of those expectations have been formed over time from many different directions. We may tell ourselves, for example, that if we can only get through this storm, then life is going to get much better. But you may recall that the illustrious Reverend Dr. H. Beecher Hicks once said, "We are either coming out of a storm, going through a storm right now, or headed into a storm." And so to expect that the storms will clear permanently and the sun will shine for the rest of our lives is not realistic. Sometimes we have to stop telling ourselves, if I can just earn this degree, if I can just snag that certification, or if I can get that promotion, then I'll be on easy street. And those expectations aren't realistic. They're not fair to ourselves and sometimes cause us to have even more misery. So let's be careful about the expectations that we internally generate. We also want to be aware of some of those expectations that come from around us. If we look around in society, and if you've spent much time in the U.S., you know that Hollywood feeds us all kinds of stories. We have these visions of a happy ending where within the space of 2 hours, anything that we watch is somehow going to come to a glorious conclusion. And that doesn't accurately reflect what real life is like. And so we want to be careful about those kinds of expectations from Hollywood. And then sometimes we get some false expectations just from going about our day being engaged in social media. We look at our friends, our colleagues, our neighbors, people in our community and in our world, and we look at the glamour of their lives, their gorgeous weddings. We look at the fact that they've snagged this wonderful promotion or that they've had this beautiful vacation in some tropical island. And we say, wow, I must not be doing something right. There's something else that I should be doing differently. And so the reality is that what we see on social media is what people choose to place on social media. So we don't always see what their heartaches are, the brokenness that they have, the despair that they may feel. And we also don't know from day to day or week to week what their sacrifices have been or what their grind really is. And so we want to be cautious about aligning our expectations based on what others are experiencing. Sometimes, too, we've also gotten some messages from well meaning folks, our friends and our family, our loved ones who have tried to encourage us and say things like, go to school, get a good job, have a great life. And so we might dutifully go along expecting things to happen and fall right into place. I'll never forget a time that I was working with a client. She was a college-age student and she was approaching graduation. And she had had that very conversation with her family. She had followed what they'd suggested. She'd gotten into a very good school. She'd made it all the way to her senior year, final semester. But she was actually experiencing that she was having difficulty finding a job that reflected what she'd studied in her major. And so, even more of a heartbreak to her was the reality that she was not going to have this job with six figures that she had dreamed of upon completing her education. Now, were those friends and family members lying to her? No. The reality is that a college education, for example, can give her those opportunities and help her to be better qualified to get a great job and move toward a great career. But again, in the race that requires perseverance, that doesn't happen immediately. And so we have to be able to pace ourselves. So Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 1 says something like this. It says, since we are surrounded with such a great cloud of witnesses, witnesses like my grandmother and your ancestors, and all of those whose positive influence is still felt in our lives so many years later, those witnesses in our lives are contributing to our ability to throw off all of the hindrances, the sin that entangles us, and allows us to run the race that is marked for us and to run it with perseverance. And so, how do we run such a race with perseverance when we are constantly encountering challenge and disappointment? We want to continue to hope for the future that God has promised us, a bright future. And yet we also have to recognize and even expect that there will be barriers, there will be thorns, there will be those disappointments that occur. Sometimes it's not anything that we've done wrong. Sometimes it's not the enemy of our souls trying to throw us off track. Sometimes it's actually an experience that is needed to get us to our next opportunity, and one where God can show us, even when we are weak, that God is still strong. Also, in remembering that we are running a marathon, it's okay to take slower strides. It's all right to pause and grab a cup of water, or to smell the roses, or to engage in whatever form of self-care replenishes you. Our goal is not to reach the finish line first, but to be able to reach our personal best in this race that we run. So I'd like for you to be encouraged in whatever challenges may present to you this day or this week. It's only temporary, and you will have some more sunny skies, and you can expect that if it ain't one thing, it's another. In closing, I would like to share an excerpt from a song that was written by Reverend Milton Brunson and performed by the Thompson Community Singers out of Chicago. And the song is entitled For the Good of Them. And you are probably very familiar with the verse from Romans chapter 8 and 28 that says, for all things work for the good of those that love God and are called according to his purpose. The race is not given to the swift, nor to the strong, but to the one that endureth until the end. There'll be problems, and sometimes you walk alone, but I know things will work out. Yes, they will, for the good of them. Ooh, for the good of them who love the Lord. So thanks for tuning in today. I hope there was something that I shared with you that will allow you to continue to persevere, to run the race with endurance. If you enjoyed this video, please like it below, or even consider subscribing and sharing with your friends. I hope that all will be well until we meet again. And until then, peace and blossoming.